Hola, bienvenidos a Sobre el Macabro Podcast. Yo soy Dee y el día de hoy cubriré un caso que sucedió en Cleveland, Ohio. To leave a child for more than a day is a parent's worst nightmare. Yet one mother found it convenient to leave her 1.5-year-old daughter alone in a playpen for 10 days while she was on vacation. The condition Jailyn Candelario was found in drove forensic pathologists, Cleveland authorities, and neighbors to complete shock. This is a tragic case of Jailyn Candelario.
Advertencia: la información de este caso puede ser desencadenante para algunos. Tenga en cuenta que algunos de estos casos pueden involucrar menores de edad, abuso, violación o violencia. Escuchen con precaución.
Warning: the information on this case can be triggering to some. Please be advised that some of these cases may involve children, abuse, rape, and violence. Listen with caution.
¿Por qué no la regaló? ¿Por qué no buscó otra opción mejor para la niña, sino dejarla en la casa sola?
They watched the baby many times. Jailyn, she was a happy baby, always smiling, always curious about stuff. She was wonderful. She was just a wonderful baby. We keep telling her not to leave her by herself. Not only me, my friend across the street too. But she always be here by herself.
There were so many people here. She could have knocked on any of our doors and asked us to take care of Jailyn, and we all would have. We were always playing with her. She was so gorgeous. And like when they told us the state that they found her in, I was heartbroken. She was like a little sister to me.
On June 16, Cleveland police received a frantic phone call urging the help of medical responders. The mother pleaded with dispatchers that her daughter was dying. When dispatchers arrived at 3129 West 97th Street home in Cleveland, Ohio, emergency responders pronounced 16-month-old Jailyn Candelario dead at the scene and said that they did not observe any signs of trauma. While at the hospital, Jailyn's body was transferred to forensic pathologist Elizabeth Mooney for a full autopsy. Dr. Mooney uncovered a tragic truth of what actually happened to Jailyn at her home. Cristel Calderon was born on September 11th, 1991 in Huaquila, Ecuador. Again, I apologize if the pronunciation of the name is wrong. I'm just trying my best, but she attended school in Ecuador and graduated from La Universidad de UTEL in 2013. During this time, Cristel was married to a man who is undisclosed at the moment. For the meantime, they were married for, I think, a couple of years. Within this relationship, they had a daughter named Amia. After a few years of being with her partner, Cristel and her husband filed for divorce. There is no statement in regards to what happened to their marriage or what drove them to go, filing a separation. But all we know is that they got a divorce. And soon after she got the divorce, she moved to the United States. After her divorce, Cristel moved to the U.S. to pursue her career in education as a Spanish teacher. For a few years, Cristel moved from school district to school district, changing from Spanish teacher to substitute teacher. The timeline isn't unsure or why there was a constant moving within districts. But at the end, she ended up being a family resource specialist to the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. After living in the US for a couple of years, Cristel would frequently fly back to Ecuador and would stay there for like a couple of days and then come back to the US. And during one of these travels, she actually met somebody on Facebook, and he was also from Ecuador, and they just hit it off. During one of her travels, she actually met this person in person in Ecuador. According to an interview with this person, he tells a news outlet that they formed a relationship and they would talk back and forth within a couple of months. And during this time is when they eventually conceived Jailyn. And after Jailyn was born, he lost all contact with Cristel. She no longer wanted to have a relationship with him anymore. He wasn't even allowed to see his daughter. So at this point, all he did was see photos of Jailyn through Facebook. According to the lawyer, during the testimony in court, her partner was abusive towards Cristel. And that is why they eventually separated. And she ended up withholding the visitations rights to have a communication or relationship with Jailyn. When it came to their home life, neighbors reported that Cristel actually lived in Cleveland, Ohio, and she lived at home with her 7-year-old daughter at the time, Amaya, and 16-month-old Jailyn, as well as Cristel's parents. Neighbors that took care of Jailyn described her as a beautiful baby. She had a contagious smile, and she was just absolutely a sweetheart. I've seen photos of her and little clips of her throughout this research, and she was just so lovely and so cute. And neighbors actually think of her very fondly, and they just absolutely loved her. Even to the point that a neighbor actually said that her mother took care of Jailyn, and she would babysit sometimes, and she considered Jailyn as a little sister, which to me it's absolutely heartbreaking, because this teenage girl had such a close bond with this child that wasn't even related to her, and considered her family because of the amount of time that they spent with her. During further investigations, neighbors also declared that they frequently took care of Jailyn for days, for weeks, and even in one occasion, almost a month. They mentioned that they would frequently call Cristel and ask her if she was going to pick up Jailyn and if she was going to come home anytime soon. One of the neighbors eventually even asked if she was going to leave any money, because they couldn't afford Jailyn's formula or her diapers or any of her essentials. It's a very low income community, and they couldn't afford taking care of Jailyn for long periods of time. And neighbors said that it was very frequent for them not to receive any answers from Cristel. She would go, days without answering her phone, and then randomly she would come and pick up Jailyn from their house, and then like a couple of weeks later, Jailyn was back at their house again, being babysat by them. During the investigations, neighbors also told authorities that Jailyn was frequently left home alone for long periods of time. They couldn't really identify for how long, but they declared that, sometimes they would hear Jailyn cry in the home for like hours, and there wasn't really much that they can do about it. Cristel would also say that, she was being taken care of by her parents because they lived in the same home. But neighbors said that the parents were always out of town or traveling, and, Jailyn was left alone. So neighbors eventually told Cristel that she shouldn't be leaving Jailyn in the home alone. that, if she needs somebody to take care of her, they were around. But for the meantime, Jailyn would be crying in her home alone as a baby. She's only a year and a half. But they never thought Cristel would leave Jailyn alone for more than a few hours. But who would have thought that Jailyn was actually left for days at one point? On June 4th, 2023, Cristel is seen on her neighbor's Ring camera leaving her home without Jailyn. Based on interrogation videos held by Law and Crime, Cristel told investigators that she had gone to Detroit to visit a friend while also working a few rounds of Uber and stayed there for 2 days. According to Cristel's Facebook page, she uploaded a photo with a man in Detroit. Based on some articles, they say that was actually Cristel and the person she was dating. And that's who she met up with in Detroit. On June 6th, Cristel is seen in the same Ring camera returning home at 7:41 a.m. But she ended up leaving at 5:36 p.m. with a suitcase. And again, Jailyn is nowhere in sight. During the research warrant of Cristel's home, officers found 2 Spirit Airline tickets dated June 8th, leaving Detroit to Puerto Rico, with a timestamp of 12:10 p.m., and a second Spirit Airline boarding pass from Puerto Rico to Detroit, dated June 11th at 6 a.m. This means that Cristel spent 2 more days in Detroit before leaving on her flight. According to court testimony, she spent those 2 days with a man she had previously seen a few days before. This man also was the one that went on the trip with her to Puerto Rico. While Cristel was partying in Puerto Rico, posting photos of her and her friends and other acquaintances onto her Facebook page, her neighbor's doorbell actually captures footage of Cristel's home. And in the background, you can hear Jailyn crying in the house, home, alone, at exactly 1 a.m. in the morning. CNN reported that the prosecutors actually testified that the officers had reviewed over 648 hours of Ring doorbell footage, where you can hear Jailyn cry out for her mom multiple times. The anguish in the sound of the baby's voice is completely heartbreaking. And of course, we're not going to include that in this episode because it's very sensitive for people, and I that's just something that I don't have the heart to share. Based on an interview with Univision, Ketty Torres, Cristel's mother, spoke about leaving Jailyn alone. At the time, both Ketty and her husband were out of town with Amaya and had left Jailyn with Cristel. According to the same interview, they had no idea Cristel was on her own vacation without Jailyn. And if they knew that she was going to be leaving her home alone, they would have taken Jailyn with them. According to court testimony, the prosecutor told the court that Cristel landed in Detroit on June 11th. And from the 12th to the 16th, she was in different parts of Michigan visiting a different man that she was dating at the same time. Cristel's vehicle was recorded with surveillance cameras showing her license plates in different tolls around Michigan, and then returning to Cleveland, Ohio on June 16th. On the 16th, at 7:36 a.m., the neighbor's Ring doorbell camera captures Cristel arriving at her home exactly 10 days after the last appearance of her on that same Ring doorbell. 10 minutes after her arriving home, Cristel makes a frantic phone call to dispatchers, telling the dispatcher that her daughter is dying. Again, I will not include the audio of this conversation because it just feels so much rage. Just hearing the way that she spoke about her daughter dying is unfathomed. According to investigators, Cristel actually took Jailyn out of her pack and play playpen, cleaned her up a little bit, and then changed her clothes right before she made the phone call. According to the affidavit that the police made when they arrived to the home, they said that Jailyn's playpen was, quote, soiled blankets and a bottom liner saturated with urine and feces, quote. But according to that same affidavit, they didn't see anything wrong with Jailyn. They didn't see any foul play or any trauma to Jailyn's body. Shortly after her death, Cristel talked to homicide detectives about what led up to Jailyn's death. On the body cam footage that the police had on while they interviewed Cristel, she told officers that she had seen Jailyn and that a week prior to her death, she was actually sick. She declared that Jailyn was actually vomiting her food and she couldn't keep any food or liquids down, and that she would cry out of discomfort. She told officers that she was losing a lot of weight because of the things that she was throwing up and because she couldn't keep food down. She went to say that the night prior to finding Jailyn's body, she had heard Jailyn let out a big scream, almost like if she was in discomfort again, but it was abnormal from the ones that she had heard the previous nights. She went on to tell officers that on June 16, she got up, took a shower, and then came out and tried to wake up Jailyn. She also mentioned that Jailyn slept for almost 12 hours, that she would sleep at 9 p.m. and wake up at 9 a.m. She told officers that she was a heavy sleeper, so she shook her a little bit to wake her up. But when she realized that Jailyn wasn't waking up, that's when she began to panic. She said that Jailyn never reacted to her shaking her, and that's when she decided to call dispatchers in order to hopefully revive Jailyn. 2 days after, on June 18th, Jailyn Candelario was brought in to talk to detectives about what happened to Jailyn again. During this moment, they confronted her and told her that they had actually found the ring footage of her car leaving Cleveland and not returning until 10 days later. They also told her that they found footage of her throughout Michigan from different toll cameras. This is when Cristel confessed and said that she was in Detroit from June 6th to the 8th and stayed with her partner David. Then she stayed at a hotel that she worked at, and then she worked a few hours on Uber. And then she was driving around the city, and that she couldn't remember where she stayed at. The interrogation went on and on. Cleveland Police Sergeant Teresa Gomez told Cristel to stop lying, to tell authorities why she never went back for Jailyn. Why didn't she bring Jailyn with her? Cristel never once made a cohesive sentence regarding leaving Jailyn in the house. She didn't look a bit remorseful or saddened about the idea of leaving her daughter alone. She didn't make any sense, and it just was really bizarre to both detectives and to officers to even understand why she would leave Jailyn in the way that she did. According to Law and Crime, 2 days after the discovery of Jailyn's murder, Cristel actually left Cleveland and went back to Michigan to visit a second man that she was dating. And then a few days later, Cristel was actually arrested for the murder of Jailyn Candelario. In February of 2024, Cristel Candelario pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and endangering a child. Prosecutors declared that Cristel was tampering with evidence. She cleared and redressed Jailyn before the responders arrived. Forensic pathologist Elizabeth Mooney determined that Jailyn died from starvation and severe dehydration. Although Jailyn was cleaned off and changed into clean clothes, forensic pathologists found that Jailyn actually had feces in her hands, her feet, and in her fingernails, as well as in her mouth and in her teeth. During the initial call with responders, they believed that Jailyn actually had dirt in her mouth, and it was probably something that she ate from the floor, from the playpen. But in reality, what she had in her mouth was feces that she was actually eating when she was left alone. During her testimony, forensic pathologist Elizabeth Mooney tearfully depicted the details that caused Jailyn's death. She also said that Jailyn experienced extreme prolonged suffering for almost a week before she died. Dr. Mooney determined that Jailyn Candelario's death was a homicide. She continues to depict that Jailyn was emaciated, weighed around 14 pounds at the time of her death. But according to her medical records, 2 months prior, for her last doctor's visit, she actually weighed 21 pounds. In total, she had lost around 7 pounds from her last checkup to the moment that she died. During her court testimony, Dr. Mooney declared that Jailyn was severely dehydrated to the point where her kidneys failed and her body was actually starting to feed off of itself to sustain nutrients, and that Jailyn passed away 2 days prior to Cristel finding her body. Dr. Mooney declared that this was one of the most horrifying cases that she had ever witnessed in her entire career. The state declared that Jailyn's family never once called to ask about any updates on Jailyn's case. Rather, they were more worried about Cristel's whereabouts, how long she was supposed to be in jail, and the overall case against Cristel. Both the Cleveland Police Department and the forensic pathologists took it upon themselves to be Jailyn's voice. Both the Cleveland Police Department and the forensic pathologists took it upon themselves to be Jailyn's voice and give her the justice that she ultimately deserved. When it came to the cross-examination, Cristel's lawyer told the judge that for years Cristel had suffered through depression, anxiety, and with an underlying mental illness diagnosis during the time she was in Ecuador. But within the last few months, Cristel stopped taking her medication and started making very erratic behaviors and had dizzy spells and lost consciousness of what she was doing or where she was at. Cristel's lawyer went on to say that she was acting out of character and would occasionally leave Jailyn on her own. That it was never her intention to leave Jailyn for a long period of time. Her lawyer also agreed with his other colleagues and told the judge that none of these actions can change the outcome of what happened, but the fact that she stopped taking her medications and looking for professional help is the reason why she should be given a lighter sentence. During the final testimony, Cristel's mother and father took the stand. Statements from her mother, Ketty Torres, showed Cristel's character. She explained that her daughter was brought up in a loving home. and she was part of a nurturing religious upbringing in Ecuador. She depicted the love that they had for their daughter and tried to plead for mercy. She also tells the judge that he should take mercy over Cristel, that she acted out of character due to her mental health issues. She ended the statement by saying, quote, "Your Honor, I ask for mercy. I ask for mercy, for clemency and compassion for a human being that was waged in a very difficult battle in her life. And I beg you not to demonize her, point fingers at her. Who in this life has not sinned against God? Anyone who hasn't, let them raise their hand. But since we believe in a God of love and of God of goodness and of God of forgiveness, He is here with us. My daughter, I love you. We're here always for you. I'm going to wait the rest of my life for you." Cristel's father, Jailyn Candelario, also addressed the judge by saying, quote, "For compassion, understanding, empathy, and mercy for someone who is going through the stage of stress and mental and emotional illness and worries." He also goes on to tell the judge that Cristel has a 7-year-old daughter that is waiting for her mother to return. He also goes on to say that he loves his daughter and that he wishes her strength during this difficult time in prison. In both of their statements, they didn't mention Jailyn as a focal point of the conversation. Their biggest worry was Cristel and her final sentencing. On March 18th, 2024, Cahoya County Common Pleas Court Judge Brendan J. Sheehan sentenced 32-year-old Cristel Candelario to life in prison without the possibility of parole for aggravated murder and endangering a child after leaving Jailyn Candelario home alone while she was on a 10-day vacation in Detroit and Puerto Rico. After Judge Sheehan made his decision, Cristel Candelario gave her final statement to the audience. She goes on to say, quote, "There's no such pain that I have in regards to the loss of my baby Jailyn. I am extremely hurt about everything that happened. I'm not trying to justify my actions, but nobody knew how much I was suffering and what I was going through. God and my daughter have forgiven me." County Common Pleas Court Judge Brendan Sheehan spoke to Cristel during her sentencing and said, quote, "Despite all the suffering that the little baby perceived, waiting for someone to save her, and you could have done that with a simple phone call. Just as you didn't let Jailyn out of her confinement, so too you should spend the rest of your life in a cell without freedom. The only difference will be the prison will at least feed you and give you liquids that you clearly denied her." Cristel's lawyer told Telemundo that they are fighting to appeal her sentence. Cristel's lawyer told Telemundo that they're fighting to appeal the sentencing, while Cristel Candelario and Ketty Torres continued to declare that the court failed to take Cristel's mental health diagnosis into consideration when it came to her actions. They are still baffled at the sentencing. I'll close this episode out with a heartfelt quote from Dr. Elizabeth Mooney.
"We know that babies and children cry when they're hungry because it's unsettling and it's uncomfortable. That's almost immediately after birth. We also know that children as early as age 4 to 5 months experience separation anxiety, with the most extreme anxiety around 9 to 18 months. Jailyn was 16 months old. This feeling of abandonment for days on end, coupled with the pain of starvation and extreme thirst, is a type of suffering I don't think any of us could ever fully fathom. So, as a forensic pathologist, it is said that we are the voice of the dead and given the responsibility to speak for those who can't. So this morning I'm honored to maintain that mission."
Our hearts go out to those who have been touched and affected by Jailyn's case. To the neighbors that carry the guilt for not knowing that Jailyn was home alone for days without proper care. and to the Cleveland Police Department, the FBI, and the forensic team who put their whole heart into bringing justice for Jailyn. Our hearts are truly torn by this case. But we are so glad that she finally received the justice that she deserved. This is the tragic murder of Jailyn Candelario.
No estoy tratando de justificar mis actos, pero nadie sabe cuánto yo estaba sufriendo y por lo que estaba pasando. Todos los días le pido perdón a Dios y a mi hija, Jailyn. Soy una persona creyente de Dios y reconozco hoy que todos y todas, muchas ocasiones, somos tentados por el enemigo. Dios y mi hija me han perdonado.
La bebé no lloraba, ella era muy tranquila. Me duele demasiado porque conviví con la bebé. No pensé que una mujer podría llegar a tanto.
It was revealed that the defendant, Jailyn Candelario, left her own child alone for hours, which led to days, which led to weeks. This 16-month-old baby was left alone in a pack and play to fend for herself for 11 days with no food, maybe milk, the clothing she had on, and the diaper she was wearing. This baby loved her mother, she needed her mother, and her mother betrayed her. Mothers usually want their children to have a long, happy life, but Candelario placed more importance on a vacation in Puerto Rico with her boyfriend than the health, safety, and well-being of her own daughter.
You committed the ultimate act of betrayal, leaving your baby terrified, alone, unprotected, to suffer what I heard was the most gruesome death imaginable. You left your baby, Jailyn, trapped in a pack and play without food and water for 10 days. This wasn't simply an over. I'm going to sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
So that was the case for this week. Once again, our hearts goes out to everyone who has been touched and has been completely heartbroken by this case. I know that when I heard about it, I was completely baffled and shocked that something like this could happen to a child, especially with the carelessness and the lack of empathy that the mother had for her daughter in just leaving there alone for 10 days without any sort of care. It's so shocking to me that somebody can do such a thing to poor innocent child. So yeah, again, our hearts goes out to anybody that has any sort of compassion for this case. I know it's difficult to hear and the details are always hard to come across, but yeah, if you guys want to talk more about this case or anything regarding this case, again, it's one of those cases that it's still kind of new and it's constantly getting more attention or more information. But if you have any opinions or any topics or anything to add when it comes to this case, you can always reach out on our social media platforms. You can reach out on Twitter or X as it's known now, on our Instagram, our threads, our Facebook page, or even our TikTok. Just type in at @SVSM_podcast or look for us as Sumacaro Podcast on Facebook and we should be the first ones to pop up. And just leave us a message, leave us a comment, and we will reply as soon as possible. And yeah, we're open to the conversation, and we truly enjoy reading your comments and your thoughts. It makes us really feel like a connected community. And yeah, sorry again, it's just me this time. But Ali should be coming back either next week, I think. And yeah, but she's doing great, and I'm pretty sure she'll leave an update somewhere in our Instagram stories. But yeah, We'll be back as a team next week, and I can't wait for you guys to see her again, because it feels pretty awkward to do these episodes by myself. Because I have nobody to banter with. But yeah, that's been the update. Thank you so much for waiting for us. I know it's been a little bit over a month. Even recording this was a bit weird and odd and different because I forgot how to do this, even though I've been doing this for almost 2 years. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, for supporting, and we're unbelievably grateful for every single one of you guys. So thank you so much for always being there, for being so supportive. And if you have any other suggestions on cases that we should cover, just let us know. Our DMs are open again. If you want to listen to the rest of our episodes, you can look for us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I think it's still available for maybe another week. Amazon Music, or wherever you stream podcasts. Just type in Sola podcast and we should be popping up. If you guys can leave a review on our podcast, that would be great. It helps us share more stories and get more, attention to these cases that need to be heard and need to be listened, especially when it comes to our community. So yeah, we're absolutely thankful for everything you guys do, and again, this is so awkward for me. I don't know how to close this, but I hope you guys have had a great week, and I hope you guys continue to follow our journey. I don't know. I'm sorry. But happy Easter for anybody that's celebrating, or happy beginning of spring. Let us know. What are your spring plans? What are you doing? Let's bring the conversation. We love talking to you guys. But for now, this is it. We'll talk to you guys next week. Bye. Stay spooky.